Well, hello, everybody. Good evening and happy Saturday. Happy November 1st. Happy beginning of November if you happen to be in November 2nd already. Happy day to all of you. Let me post this. Ta-da. All right. So we are back tonight with another reading of Gifted by T.W. Lewis. If you happen to miss the prologue and first four chapters, they are all available on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. You can stop out there and listen at your leisure. But tonight, we'll dive back in, get ourselves through a couple more chapters here, and see how it's going. Happy Catterday to you, Joy in General. Pecan. Or are you in a part of the land that says pecan? Pecan, 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 pecan. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about how we started. We met Cal and Ovette. Cal and Ovette are orphans. They were living with Lady Havisham and Leif in an orphanage. And now we'll continue on. I don't know why I went with now. um, so Leif and Lady Havisham, basically ran an orphanage. It started out with only Cal and Ovette in it, and then they got all sorts of other littles in there as time went on. Cal and Ovette were what were known as Hollowborn. Hollowborn are people who cannot access the gift. GYFT. Hey, it's almost like it was there in the title. The gift is basically a slight form of magic. From what I've been able to tell so far, being able to access the gift gives you some, let's call it fire ability. The ability to channel some flames or some fire or some things like that. Um, and they were both hollowborn, meaning they could not access it. So, not good for them, but, is obviously a thing. Um, and so Cal gets picked on because most people are able to access it. He is not able to, so he gets picked on for being who he is. Comes to find out that most of the people who channel the gift channels in a red color. Ovette has started to show signs of being able to channel in a white color. A white color is the sign of somebody who might be gifted, which is a level beyond having the gift. Leif finds out about this. Cal finds out about this. Leif sends Cal off to find Ovette. He goes to their secret hiding space and finds her to bring her back. He's upset that she never told him, but she didn't know how to tell him, sort of. Yeah, I mean, Hollowborn, mugglish, unable to channel the magic at this point in time. But of course, and normally if you didn't have it by the time you were 16, you didn't get it. Ovette started showing her stuff, I want to say at around 18, give or take. And so still a chance, but not a good thing for Ovette because it turns out they are so their people are basically um subjects of the Davins. And the Davins will basically destroy or capture or take over any of the gifted. The Davins come from another dimension, and the goal is basically they want to come and take over all of the power from the dimension that Cal and Ovette are from. And they can do that with the gifted. So they get a powerful person who comes down and they attack the orphanage. They burn it to the ground, or they set it on fire, with their basically soldiers of the area. Prefects? Is it prefects in this book? Might be prefects. Um, and so not good for a lot of their stuff, but Cal shows back up with Ovette. He wants to go in there and do something about it. One of the younglings, or one of the littles, gets killed trying to protect one of the other littles. Um, and then Lady Havisham gets killed trying to protect one of them. And then Cal rushes in and kills one of the prefects. Basically, is stabbed with the dagger that he used. Um, and Ovette comes out and says, "Look, I am the Gyfted. I will go with you if you do not kill any more of them." Leif is choosing not to do anything about it because he says, it's too late. But Cal is not going to let it go because Ovette is his person. Clearly, they've grown up together and they are each other's people. So now that's basically where we start in. We don't know Leif's background. We don't know why Leif, has a sword. We don't know what his background is at the moment, but we know that Cal has taken Leif's sword, which is heavier than they expected it to be, and he's going to join the resistance and to try to save Ovette. And that is where we will pick up for this evening. So sit back, everybody, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive in to our next reading of Gyfted. As always, I do record these chapters, so if you have missed them, they are available. The previous ones are available on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. And after tonight, the chapters from tonight. Thank you, Joy in General. After tonight, the chapters from tonight will be up and available on the YouTube channel as well. You are also welcome to chat with each other wherever you happen to be. YouTube is a place I would recommend you stop in and do the chatting. I do sometimes have the authors who stop in. D.W. Lewis happens to reside in Singapore, so very different time zone than we are in here. I want to say it's earlier morning or it's morning, before noon over there. So he may stop by, he may not. We will see. If he does, fantastic. He'll probably stop by the YouTube channel. But chat with each other, and if you have any questions, any comments, anything else, throw them in the chat, and I am happy to engage between chapters because I don't engage when I'm recording them. So here we go, everybody. Let's dive in to our next reading, starting with 5. Carrying Leif's sword through the streets proved far more difficult than Cal had anticipated. Though they were full of people going about their daily business, something felt off. The usual sidelong glances and whispered comments were still there, but now they carried an extra layer of fear, as though people were scared to come close. More scared. They parted before him as he wandered down the street, as though he carried some contagious disease. Cal told himself it was Leif's sword strapped to his back, making them extra nervous. Not that they'd ever welcomed his presence on the best of days. Let them look. Let them whisper. He didn't care what they thought of him. Today, their opinions meant less than nothing. They didn't have the courage to stand up against the Davins, but he did, and he would. He would get Ovette back, and then... The thought paused him mid-stride. True to form, he hadn't taken the time to think about what he'd do after getting to Ovette. Shay claimed she could get him to where the Davins were keeping her. But could Shay also get them out? And where would they go after? They'd have to leave the city, of course, which suited Cal fine, as he'd wanted to leave for years. Ovette had agreed, but he suspected she'd just been going along with whatever he said. Now that he thought about it, he didn't have anywhere else to go. Neither of them did. Cal shook his head and grunted to himself, startling a passerby. Thinking about the future could wait until later. Right now, he had to get to Shay and then to Ovette, one step at a time. The sword's weight pressed down against his back. It was heavier than he'd expected it to be, more uncomfortable, too. The prefects wore theirs with ease, as if they weighed nothing, but the makeshift strap he'd fashioned bit into his shoulder. It rubbed through his thin tunic, making his skin raw. He needed to find somewhere to readjust it, somewhere discreet, off the main street. Besides, a hollowborn wandering the main street with a too big for him sword wasn't the smartest idea. If a passing patrol saw him, there'd be no talking his way out of it. New plan: get off the main street, fix the strap, then. His stomach growled, loud and audible, interrupting his strategizing. He couldn't remember the last time he'd sat down to eat something. Too long, he muttered to himself, his hand rubbing his abdomen. He was close to Bagson's hole in the wall, just a few alley skips away. He wasn't exactly thrilled about seeing Bagson again so soon, but weak and injured as he was, he didn't have much choice. His hand drifted to Ovette's coin pouch, tucked against his chest. He'd come close to leaving it behind, not wanting the temptation to spend what wasn't his. The memory of her being dragged away while he lay helpless in a pool of his own blood surfaced without warning. He'd told her time and time again that he'd always be there to protect her, promising to keep her safe. But when it mattered, when she'd needed him the most, he'd failed. His heartbeat thumped in his ears, his stomach hardening as he recalled her kissing his cheek, whispering she was sorry. He dug his fingers into the pouch's worn fabric. He wouldn't fail her again. Ever. He couldn't. He would keep his promise to her, no matter what. Another gnawing groan in his stomach brought him into the moment. He shook himself, dispelled the negativity that had been building. He needed to focus on the task at hand. The past was the past. Nothing he could do about it now. He needed to eat. Ovette would understand. Dipping into a nearby alley, Cal navigated his way to Bagson's place. Noise from the patrons inside reached him before he turned to the final corner. A quick peep through one of the small, grimy windows confirmed what he suspected. As always, the establishment overflowed with people drinking away their worries. It didn't matter that the alcohol Bagson served was little more than swill. He was proud of the service he provided to the community. Ovette once claimed Bagson must have been quite the lady killer in his youth, citing his strong jaw and the thick black mane that framed his face. But Cal couldn't see it. To him, Bagson looked rough, big-bellied and strong-armed, a brute that could take on an army by himself. The boom of his voice better suited to battlefield orders than taking drinks. Cal entered through the front this time. It would be quicker that way, and Bagson would understand. He had to. The merriment and jeers from the bar's patrons masked his entrance well enough, and no one noticed him slipping in. And why would they? The rosy, red-cheeked patrons were too focused on their cups and spills. Bagson stood behind the bar, rotating a dirty bowl around an equally dirty washcloth while a patron, deep into his cups by the flush on his cheeks, regaled Bagson with his current woe. The exchange garnered no look of passion or deep engagement on Bagson's part, but it was a common sight to see. Everyone brought their problems to Bagson, whether he liked it or not. Cal made his way to the counter and waited for Bagson to catch his eye, earning a deep scowl and a shake of the head for his patience. He gestured to their usual meeting spot out back. The lines around Bagson's eyes deepened. He threw down his washcloth and stomped into what Cal knew to be the kitchen area, ignoring the other patrons. With a sigh of relief, Cal exited and made his way around the building, slinking into the shadows of the alleyway where Bagson waited. The coiled muscles of his thick arms tensed as he watched Cal's approach. "I told you not to come back," Bagson said, his words clipped and brokering no argument. "Bagson, I need your help," Cal said. "Don't care. Answer's no." "But—" "No, Cal." Bagson cut him off. I want nothing to do with you or that orphanage anymore. You tell Leif I'm sorry, but the prefects nearly trashed the place asking questions about you lot, harassing my customers. I've a right mind to haul you to the coal myself. And don't you even start with the— They took Ovette, Cal said, the words slipping out. Bagson's expression crumpled, the angry creases sagging in step with the giant man's shoulder. He scrubbed his hand down his face and let out a weary sigh. I heard. His eyes flicked to the sword digging into Cal's back. Plan on getting her back? What do you think? Cal replied. Bagson's gaze swept over Cal, marking the leathers and how he favored his injured side. Sure you're up for this, boy? Never been more sure about anything. He gruffed, straightening to his full, imposing height, looking all the warrior Cal envisioned Bagson had once been, even with the dirty apron. Got coin? Yeah, Cal replied, pulling a few scratched coins out of Ovette's pouch. Scooping up the coins, Bagson walked back inside, returning a few moments later with a small bundle of cloth. All I can spare, Bagson said. It'll be enough, Cal replied, tearing into the meager strips of dried meat and bread. Bagson's scrutinizing gaze made Cal feel very small. Eventually, Bagson let up and turned to head back inside. Tell Leif, I'm sorry about what happened. We're not going back there, but Ovette will want to thank you herself when she comes back. No, Cal. Bagson's back remained turned. This is the last time I can help you. Don't come back here again. I mean it. I can't have you bringing any more trouble to my doorstep. Without another word, Bagson slammed the back door shut. Cal's heart sank as the deadbolt clicked into place, the gesture hitting him harder than he expected. He jabbed his fist into the door, clenching his teeth as the pain radiated through his knuckles. And what do we have here? A familiar snide voice called out from behind. Making more trouble? Looking to bring the prefects down on someone else? Cal turned, greeted by the sight of Jord grinning from ear to ear, flanked, as always, by Din and Teston. I'm not in the mood today, Jord. Just leave me alone. This was the last person Cal wanted to see, speak to, think about, or even have time to acknowledge. You see, I would, but I find myself in a precarious position. George stepped forward, activating his brand with a flick of his wrist, the dull red light pooling in his palm. You're disturbing the peace again, and as an upstanding citizen, I feel it is our civic duty to uphold that peace. And we'll start by escorting you to the proper authorities. To his left, Teston's palm pulsed with a similar hue, while Din's fist thrummed with blue light. Back off, Jord, Cal said, drawing Leif's sword from his back. His arms shook as he heaved it against the weight of the blade, bringing it up to eye level. Despite the sword's heft, he tried to imitate what he thought would be a heroic stance. Hands clasped tight around the hilt, shoulders locked, feet apart, back straight, but not too straight. It was all he could do not to stumble forward. George's grin spread even further, the corners of his mouth becoming pointed tips. Ha! Looks a little too big for you. Teston and Din laughed in time with Jord, synced perfectly, obediently. Jord took a step closer, the dull red in his palm ignited into flecks of flame. Cal waited, allowed Jord to get closer, ignored the cackles of the idiots Jord called friends. The moment Jord stepped within a few inches of the blade, Cal made his move. Shifting forward, he raised the sword and jerked against the momentum to bring it back down. He wasn't surprised when Jord stepped out of the way. In fact, he'd hoped he would. The blade clanged against stone, sending up a small plume of red dust into the air. Seeing his moment, Jord lunged forward, palm first. A ball of gift fire, bigger than the last one he'd thrown at Cal, shot forward. Freeing one hand from the sword's hilt, Cal threw his shoulder back and held his breath as the fireball sailed past. Cal pivoted against the weight of the sword and threw his fist into Jord's face. The blow glanced off his chin, enough to send him back a few paces. Stunned, Jord kicked out as he stumbled back, his foot connecting with the hilt's crossguard, driving the pommel into Cal's stomach. The impact shook his legs, and white-hot pain lanced through his stomach, like a hot poker being shoved into his gut. Cal's grip on the sword faltered, but he managed to reorient himself and bring the blade up once more, ignoring the throb of pain even as the sides of his vision began to blur. "You'll need more than a toy sword," George spat. He palmed the blade to the side and clasped his hands around the hilt, just above Cal's. The glow of his brand intensified, heating the metal until Cal's palms blistered. Cal willed himself to hang on to the sword, but it was no use. The pain was too intense. With a cry, he released his hold and shook his hands against the flesh searing. George sneered as Cal stumbled back. "Not so dangerous after all, right, lads?" He flicked his wrist and another ball of gift fire flared to life in his palm. Grinning, his lackeys advanced forward, fanning out to flank Cal. Cal reached behind his back, drew Lady Havisham's dagger, and held it at arm's length. Jord doubled over, pointing and howling with laughter. "Oh, come on," he jeered. "What good's that little toothpick going to do?" Cal's eyes flicked between Jord and the sword lying at his feet. "What, you want this?" Jord said as he scooped up the sword. "How about I hold on to it for you, huh?" "Give it back. Now," Cal spat, growling through the pain in his stomach and the burns on his hand. "Come and get it," George sneered, his smile shifting to match. Cal glanced from side to side as Teston and Din edged forward. Outmatched, Cal made the only choice he had left. He ran. Cal sprinted through the back alleys, taking turns at random. His side burned as blood soaked through the bandage, but he couldn't think about that right now. He needed to lose Jordan his thugs and make sure they couldn't follow. Only then could he focus on stitching his stomach back together. "There's no use in hiding. We'll find you eventually." George's voice echoed off the clay walls, making it impossible to tell where he was. It dawned on Cal that his genius plan of losing his pursuers in this maze of back streets and alleyways had him completely turned around. "Don't you want your sword back?" Cal had to get that sword back. The thought of George's hands around the blade made the muscles in his neck tighten. That sword belonged to Leif, and Jord wasn't worthy of laying one grubby finger on it. "Come on, Hollowborn. This game has gone on long enough." Cal took solace in Jord's growing irritation, evident by his barking orders at Teston and Din. Dagger in hand, Cal turned and used Jord's voice to guide him back through the maze. Before long, Jord's disappointment sounded close, just a few lanes ahead. Any other day, Cal would have celebrated getting under Jord's skin so much. He edged closer to the corner of a nearby wall, poking his head out just enough to get a good view of the alley. Jord was so close. Close enough for Cal to see the redness in his face and the vein in his neck bulging as he berated his lackeys. "How did you lose him? He's making you look like a fool!" Jord yelled. Teston didn't look at Jord, instead choosing to stare at the floor like a naughty child being admonished by a parent, despite being a clear few inches taller than Jord. Din, on the other hand, was either braver or dumber than his counterpart. His fists shook as Jord continued his tirade. What use are you both if you can't even keep track of one stupid hollowborn, huh? Sorry, boss. Teston muttered to the ground. His voice was deep, gravelly, but the way he spoke sounded more like it belonged to an oversized child. Din's face scrunched with each big huff of breath, to the clear displeasure of Jord. Cal scanned the alley, his gaze darting from object to object. The thud of his heart grew stronger with each passing moment. His pulse continued to quicken until a glint of metal caught his eye. Leif's sword lay across a couple of barrels that had been discarded and left to rot in the elements just a few paces behind Jord and his friends, but unfortunately, also many paces away from where Cal was crouched. I'm not interested in your excuses or your apologies. Find him, or you'll be answering to my father, Jord snapped. I don't think your father will care about one hollowborn, Din snarled. He towered over Jord, who, to his credit, did not appear intimidated by this behemoth's glare. What my father thinks is none of your business. You should concern yourself more about doing what I say when I say. Otherwise, I might just have a chat with dear old Daddy and inform him that the two bumbling imbeciles he hired are nothing but hollow lovers. George snarled. How is your darling new bride, Din? I hear she's with child. Would be an awfully inconvenient time for you to lose the only paying work a moron like you can gain, wouldn't it? Jord had these two exactly where he wanted them. What's more, the threat had worked. Despite the clear difference in size, Din backed down, lowered his head, and mumbled an apology. Jord's expression shifted to a look that radiated superiority. Something else glinted in the midday sun, something much closer to Cal than the sword. A few paces into the alley, a collection of empty bottles lay strewn across the floor, and a few were toppled on top of a wooden crate. Cal watched as Jord continued his tirade against his friends. Taking a fortifying breath, Cal crept forward, ignoring the sting in his side. His pulse spiked at every crunch of stone under his feet. Have to hurry, as Jord's admonishments wouldn't last forever. Now that you know your place again, fan out and search. Call if you see or hear anything. Understand? George said, his tone full of authority. Bought, not earned. Teston and Din grumbled their responses. I can't hear you clearly, George said, leaning forward with a hand to his ear. We understand, growled Din. Teston didn't say a word. Grabbing a bottle, Cal crouched while he scampered his way back to the alley junction and nestled himself back around the corner. With one last look at Jord and his men, he threw the bottle as hard as he could in the opposite direction. It soared down the alley and hit the wall with a satisfying crunch. What was that? Jord snapped. Over there! Let's go! Cal flattened himself against the wall as Jord and his thugs raced past. Making full use of the scant seconds his distraction had bought him, Cal bolted for the sword. His movements were jagged. Pins and needles shot up and down his right side, and he stumbled mid-stride, crashing into one of the rotten barrels. Pain blossomed through his stomach, hot and wet, and the remaining bottles crashed to the ground. There he is! Get him! Jord cried, already running back to where Cal was. Cal pushed himself off the barrel, gritting his teeth as he ran. The gnawing pain in his stomach deepened as he raced past the sword. He wanted to take it with him, but it was too heavy, too awkward for him to fumble with. The alley started to look familiar as Cal continued on, the backs of several stores he'd been thrown out of serving as welcome signposts. In the distance, the district gate loomed above the squat buildings. If he could get to the streets, then losing Jord in the busy crowd should be easy enough. Cal dipped out of the alley and pushed into the throng of people. Normally, this many people made him feel uneasy, but for now, they served as welcome camouflage. His heart thundered at the sound of Jord calling out his name. The day had left Cal drained. His side burned, and his fresh change of clothes was sticking to the now soaked through bandage. More than once, Cal's foot slipped as he clambered over the debris pile in front of the hideout. More, more than once, he had to bite back a curse. He risked a glance back into the crowd and grinned at the sight of George shoving people aside and pulling back hoods. With as much stealth as the iron wrought door allowed, Cal snuck into the stairwell. It loomed over him, looking more daunting than ever. Swallowing back the dryness in his throat, he began his climb, one hand on the warped handrail and the other clutching his stomach. For what seemed like an age, he climbed, one foot in front of the other. Each gasp of hot, dry air was like swallowing sand. His chest was burning when he reached the top. The memory of the smoke rising from the orphanage felt distant and unreal as he looked over the city. In the distance, Ignis volcano pulsed orange, red, and hot, its fury reflected in the enormous chain link jutting out of its mouth. On any other day, this glow would have been smooth and consistent, but now it looked different, almost angry. Cal pulled himself away from the sight of it and headed toward the gallery door, toward the dim light coming from within. Inside, Shay leaned against the wall, head tilted as she looked out over the rest of the city. Cal hadn't put much stock in the way others dressed before, typically being far more concerned with whether or not somebody was going to throw moldy food at him or cuss him out. She wore stitched black pants tucked into thigh-high leather boots and a matching cut-off jacket over a tattered white tunic. She looked fierce, confident, and capable. She looked every inch the fighter Cal aspired to be. "Took you long enough, handsome," she said, grinning as she turned and catching where his gaze fell. "You know, it's rude to stare." "How did you know it was me? I could have been a guard," Cal replied, holding himself as straight as his pride and the radiating pain in his stomach would allow. She chuckled. "Wouldn't be much of a secret spot if any old someone could wander in now, would it?" "And yet here you are," Cal said, playing it cool. She crossed the space and took a seat at the table, gesturing for him to do the same. "Good thing I'm not any old someone then, isn't it, Cal?" Cal joined her at the table, keeping his eye on her as he tried his best not to limp. "Then who are you, really?" "I told you," she replied. She was close, close enough for Cal to take in her scent, to notice the shock of red in her tightly bound ponytail, and the way her features softened as she leaned forward. "I'm the gal who can help you." "Not good enough," Cal said, allowing himself to grimace. "I'm going to need more than that." "You're not a very trusting person, are you?" she replied, unperturbed. Cal leaned back in the chair, the pain in his stomach easing somewhat. "No." "That's going to make working together difficult," she said. "Okay, tell you what. You have until dusk to ask me anything you like. We've got some time to kill, after all." "What do you mean?" "It's too dangerous to go wandering the streets during the daytime." "I did." "Yeah. How'd that go?" she said, jabbing Cal's knee with her foot. The jolt sent a fresh wave of pain through Cal's gut. "We'll wait here for a few hours. Let the sun go down a bit. Then we can make our move." "Where? To Ovette?" "No. We're not ready for that yet, she said, gesturing at Cal's stomach. I need to make contact with someone first. They're not far. Where? In a safe house. What safe house? Cal asked. One of the many in Igni. She leaned back and propped her feet up on the table. Cal's stomach ached in a different way as dust and small clumps of clay fell onto the old tablecloth. Something the matter? She asked, grinning. Get your feet off the table, Cal uttered. He knew her feet on the tablecloth shouldn't bother him. It was just a thing. But it did bother him. The tablecloth was Ovette's thing. Just making myself feel at home, she said, leaning back even further in her chair. Cal didn't respond, just stared at her. Through her, really. More focused on the memory of Ovette and him sharing whatever meager food scraps they didn't feel guilty about keeping for themselves. Fine, she huffed, if you're going to sulk about it. She stood and wandered back over to the wall, returning to her previous position. Shay, really, why are you here? Why are you helping me? I'm not. She inclined her head toward the streets below. I'm helping them. Cal didn't have to see the people down there to know who she meant. The Davins have us in a cage. A well-designed cage at that. Most of the people down there are happy without ever thinking of the damage that cage causes. The choices that have been taken away from them. She sounded serious, any hint of flippancy gone. It's our job to help them. To free them? No, not free them. We're going to show them the way out. Her tone was softer, and Cal was torn between grinning and the churning feeling he had in his stomach. Torn between voicing agreement or scoffing in reply. Her expression was passive, but her eyes held a certain something in them. Something Cal couldn't quite put his finger on. What about you? She asked, her tone chipper and playful once again. Why are you doing this? The question caught Cal off guard. He thought it obvious why he was here. You already know. I'm getting Ovette back. From what? She asked. What do you mean, from what? From the Davins and their rule. Cal answered with as much venom as he could muster. The Davins rule? You're going to have to be a little more clearer than that. No, I'm not. It was supposed to be Cal asking her questions, not the other way around. If you ask me, it sounds like you don't know why you're here. She tapped a finger against her chin, one eyebrow overarched. Good thing I'm not asking you then, isn't it? Cal knew the comeback was weak, but he lacked the energy to care. He wanted to know more about Shay and her operation, but he didn't feel like being interrogated about his own reasons for being here. He was here for Ovette. That was enough. That should be enough. True, true, she said, as she pushed herself off the wall. She made her way over to a stack of cushions in the corner and stretched herself across them, her boots smearing grime across Ovette's careful arrangement. But I'm not the one on trial here now, am I? What? This some sort of rebellion recruitment speech? Cal balked. You show me the evil of our overlords, and then I vow to do whatever is in my power to bring them down? Would that be so bad? Save it. All I care about is getting Ovette back. After that, our little partnership is over. Ha! Partnership. Cute. She'd made herself comfortable and was now midway through an over-exaggerated yawn. That's what this is, isn't it? Cal said. I help you, and you help me? She turned over, rustling against the cushions and propping an arm under her head. Right now, it's more me helping you, but that's okay. Another yawn. Keep watch for a few hours? Consider it the start of your audition for joining us. I already said that when Ovette's back, we're done. I've never said anything about joining you. Uh-huh. Sure thing, tough guy. Cal's lips moved as he tried to think of a follow-up. Something else to say or some other question to ask. What happened to me asking you anything I wanted? All that time we had to kill. As great a conversationalist as you are, I found something more interesting to do. Her words were sluggish and noncommittal. Fine. Have it your way, Cal said, propping his elbows onto the table with a thud. I always do, she replied. Woke as Shay shook him. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but the dim light and lack of noise from the market below told him enough. Rise and shine, she said, as perky as she had been earlier. Wiping the sleep from his eyes, Cal pulled himself out of the chair. His bones ached as he twisted and stretched the sleep out of his body. The pain in his side had lessened, but he was still cautious not to injure himself further. His cheeks flushed at the audible grumble from his stomach. Don't worry, I'll get you something to eat at the safe house, Shay said, smiling with peculiar sincerity. Hope you like military rations. Never tried 'em. Trust me, you might prefer it that way, she said, gathering up her gear. Oh, and by the way, you're terrible at keeping watch. Cal rolled his eyes and made his way over to the crack in the wall, still shaking the last vestiges of sleep from his limbs. Hues of fiery orange and purple washed the sky as the sun crept out of view. Mottled gray clouds cast the ground in large patches of shadow, making it difficult to see what was below. Ready to go? Shay called out from behind him. With one last look at the great chain, Cal followed her out along the wall and headed back down to the street. Outside, Shay clambered with ease over the pile of debris and rubble. When she reached the top, she spun on her heel and offered her hand. Up you come, she said, making no attempt to hide her smugness. I can manage, Cal grunted, hauling himself up as fast and as gracefully as he could. Shay watched his progress, never taking her hand away or changing her expression. You know, you're going to have to start relying on me at some point. We're in this together, right, partner? Cal stopped, stared back into her smirk smiley face. So, we are partners? Wow. Is it always going to be like this with you the whole time? Hesitating, Cal took Shay's hand, allowing her to pull him up the rest of the way. His teeth clenched on reflex, though whether it was from the stab of pain in his side or the wound to his pride, he couldn't tell. Shay moved fast and quiet, the crunch of gravel beneath her feet muted. Cal tried his best to emulate her deftness, but by comparison, he was a parade. He bit back an inward curse, deciding to ask her for instructions later. Such skills would be useful if he was going to get Ovette out of wherever the Davins were keeping her. After a few minutes, Shay held up a hand, either not noticing or not caring about the noise Cal was making. What? Why have we stopped? Cal whispered. Guards, by the gate. She pointed ahead, her finger indicating the two guards that were barely visible in the dim light. Okay, Cal said. What's the plan? She took a moment, craning her neck from left to right. I can see the guard post, but I can't make out what's inside from here. We're going to have to get closer, she said, her eyebrow arching once more. How sneaky are you feeling? As much as I need to be, Cal replied. That's the spirit. She beamed. How she could smile at a time like this was beyond Cal, but he was beginning to realize that most of the things that made Shay tick were beyond someone like him. Keep low and move fast. Try to match my footfalls, okay? It'll help with the noise. Easy, right? Cal's heart began to thud, the sound thumping in the base of his ears. No killing. The words were out of his mouth before he'd finished thinking of them, and he suddenly found himself wishing the pit in his stomach would just swallow him whole. It took a few seconds for her to answer. Only if I have to. With a wink, Shay crept forward at speed, her arms tucked into her side. She made it to the guard post entrance just as the nearest guard passed his gaze her way. If she had been a second slower, she watched, waiting for the guard to look the other way again. The moment he did, she activated her brand. A muted gray began to shift and form living shadows. The shadows coiled around her fingers and coalesced in her palm, formless. With an odd flicking gesture, they leapt from her hand and latched themselves to the guard's temple. They looked alive as they snaked across his eyes. The guard never reacted, seemingly blissfully unaware. Without taking her eyes off the guard, Shay gestured for Cal to join her by the wall. The jolt and soft thump of each step poked Cal just enough to cause discomfort. His chest felt light as he came to a halt next to her. What was that? Cal whispered. I've never seen gift like that before. She appraised him with the same shit-eating grin, only now it was accompanied by a tilt of her head. You're so adorable, she whispered back. Still crouched, she reached up a hand and gently pushed open the door, welcomed by the throaty snores of a guard inside. Shay edged her way inside, signaling for Cal to follow. The wooden floorboards of the guard room soaked up any noise their footfalls made, save for a slight creak. Something in front of the guard caught Cal's eye. A stack of papers that had been strewn across the top of the desk. As he crept by, his eyes fell upon the etching of an old man. It was clipped to the top of a small bundle of pages. Cal's heart leaped into his throat as he read the name at the top. Lephestus. His hand reached forward. He couldn't stop himself. Below the name, he saw a description fitting that of the orphanage. Old building, multiple repairs over the course of occupation, home to runaways and dissidents. Report any activity to Lord Inquisitor Gregorin. Lord Inquisitor Gregorin. Was that the same man who'd taken Ovette away? Cal focused on the picture of Leif, his vision tunneling. He looked younger, his hair shorter, cropped and well maintained. No hint of stubble across his smooth chin. And his eyes, even in the etching, they were cold, piercing. A strange symbol had been stamped on into the top right corner. It looked like part of a spire with something metallic wrapped around it. Cal! Shay's sharp whisper tore Cal away from the pages. She looked right at him, her eyes looking similar to Leif's in the etching. Cal looked back, the now awake guard's confused expression taking stock of Cal and Shay. Things happened too fast for Cal to keep up with. The guard shifted in his seat, attempting to stand. His hand went to his side, grasping the hilt of his sword. His mouth opened. His words gargled in his throat, and he coughed up blood as a small dagger found purchase. The guard slumped back in his chair, his eyes open and looking straight at Cal, accusing him. Cal spun, forgetting himself for a moment. Shay still had one arm extended. The buoyancy of her personality had vanished from her expression, replaced with ice-cold determination. She crept over to the guard, put one hand on his cheek, and pulled out the dagger with the other. Cal flinched as blood spurted from the hole. Shay moved on, bolting the door they had just come through in time. The small iron bar jostled as the guard outside pushed. Hey, Svenna! Open up! Svenna! Shay didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She ran through the other door, out into the Stokes, abandoning all pretense of stealth. Cal chased after her, moving away from the sound of the guard's shouts and the cracking of wood. What the? Svenna! Svenna! After them! The cries of the guards faded as Cal and Shay sprinted through the Stokes. Cal struggled to keep up. Shay moved with speed, dipping and darting between the few who remained out this late at night. Evidence that this wasn't the first time she'd had to make a quick exit from a crime scene. Cal's stomach groaned at the fragrant spices and the bubbling of flavored oils in the main square. He'd been here a few times with Ovette, wandering from stall to stall, all the while promising her that he wouldn't pinch any of the bric-a-brac that was on display. Trinkets of unknown use, but they would have looked so good in the hideout. This was the area for the wealthier people of the district, the people Cal usually tried to avoid. Shay! Cal panted, not daring to slow down despite the pull of his muscles. Where are we going? We're close. Keep up, Shay replied. Her words clipped, joyless, annoyed. A stitch added to the burn in Cal's side. His feet felt clumsy, and it became more and more difficult to put them where he wanted them to go. He couldn't take much more. He felt like he was seconds away from collapsing. Stop! Cal almost ran into Shay as she pulled to a halt. She was looking up at one of the biggest houses he'd ever seen. The outside looked as big as the orphanage, and then some. Cal had to do a double take to make sure it wasn't connected to any other house in the street. Though upon quick inspection, it became clear that this house, this mansion, was the street. The white stonework was precise, not a soot mark or smear on any of it. Each brick was cut into even lines. It didn't have any of the uneven bricks that needed extra clay cladding to cement them together. Shay stepped toward the front entrance, a large set of wooden doors inlaid with iron spirals and floral-like patterns. She rapped on the door with impatience. A few moments later, the door swung open, the light from inside blinding Cal. Ah, Shay, you're here. Father was beginning to worry that you wouldn't make. The light faded, and Cal stared into the face of the last person he wanted to see. What in the flames is he doing here? Spat a flustered Jord. Well, I sure didn't expect Jord to be the one at that counter, but hey, whoever knows what's going to happen. So, guys, exciting enough for you so far? As Cal continues to make mistakes as he tries to figure out his way forward. And Shay, the person who is, well, we don't know yet. And what the hell is up with Jord being there? I guess we have to find out next. Right. That's the way it goes. We'll find out now as we start into our next chapter. So, let's dive into 6. Cal paced back and forth, clenching sweaty fists at the idea of being in Jord's house. This oversized mansion. This beacon of everything he hated about the Udens. Well, not all Udens, just some of them. The ones like Jord. The ones looked down on him. On everyone. He couldn't take it any longer. Where was Shay? She had told him to wait and be patient. Not Cal's strong suit. And right now wasn't the time for patience. It was the time for action, the time for getting Ovette. Cal slammed his fist against the wall, a futile attempt to push away the pounding in his palms and calm the thump of blood in his veins. It made his skin feel hot, made the room feel small, closed off. If Shay wasn't going to help him, then he'd just have to do it himself. He'd find Ovette. Shay had said she'd been taken to the Citadel. All he had to do was get through the smelt mines. Somehow. Rescue Ovette. Somehow. And bring her back home. Somehow. He stomped over to the door, swinging it open and eliciting a startled yelp from Shay. She froze, her hand outstretched toward the handle. Oh, you're still awake. She composed herself quickly, adopting her customary coolness. Smug and arrogant was all Cal saw. Here, I brought you something to eat. Stepping inside, she shoved two paper packets into Cal's chest. The corner of whatever was inside of one of the packets broke off as he fumbled to catch it. What are these? Military rations, Shay replied, her expression condescending. I told you I'd get you some. She sat herself down on the bed, propping herself up on her palms. Right. Thanks. Cal stared at the packets, the gnawing in his stomach countered by the moisture seeping through the packet's lining. Both dry and moist at the same time. Yeah. Eat. Her eyes wandered around the room, not landing on anything in particular. Nice place they've got here, huh? Ever thought about living somewhere like this? Cal tore open the first packet and was treated to the smell of cocoa mixed with dried oats. It wasn't an altogether unpleasant smell compared to the slop he'd eaten over the years. The yellow-brown square had an unappetizing sheen to them, and it crumbled apart even more as he tried to squeeze it out of the packet. The crumbs pattered to the floor, and Shay chuckled to herself as she watched him. Trust me, you don't want to wait too long. The quicker you eat them, the better it'll be. She turned her head away, her shoulders shivering almost imperceptibly. Cal took one last look at the clump of food in his hand before biting off as much as he could in one go. The texture hit him before the taste. The sheen that coated the entire brick was an intensely sugary syrup. It made the clump stick to the roof of his mouth and between his teeth as he chewed. The taste was bland, save for the sweetness of the syrup coating. No hint of cocoa or oats could be discerned. Swallowing was one of the most difficult things he'd done all day. Told you you'd prefer not to have tasted them, Shay said. Her expression told Cal everything he needed to know about his own. Despite the initial experience, Cal took another bite. And then another, until the first packet was empty, his hunger overriding the taste. I've had worse. He gulped, swallowing the final bite, and looked around the room for something to drink. As if reading his thoughts, Shay tossed over a small canteen. Feel free to eat mine. They're designed to have everything a prefect needs. But if you ask me, ugh. Her shoulders shook again. Cal took long draws from the canteen, having its contents. At least it's food, Cal said, debating between eating the second packet now or later. Anyway, bringing you supper isn't the only reason I stopped by, Shay said. Her disgust had disappeared, replaced now by a more serious expression. Jaren wants to speak with you. It took some doing and more than a little persuasive promising, but he's agreed to let you tag along with the crew tomorrow night. Tomorrow night? Cal blurted, nearly dropping the second food packet. Why aren't we leaving now? The longer we wait, the more danger Ovette is in. Shay shot up her hands. Whoa, calm down, tough guy. Ovette isn't in any real danger just yet. There's still time before the linking. Cal's brow furrowed. He swore he'd heard that term somewhere before. The memory was distant, just out of reach. The more he thought about it, the more difficult it became to recall. The linking is a type of ceremony involving the gifted and the chains, Shay said, as if reading Cal's thoughts. Something about binding the two together. It's all a very hush hush behind closed doors kind of thing. What happens during the ceremony? Don't know. Well, is it something that hurts? Will it kill Ovette? Don't know, she repeated with a smile. Okay then. Is there some reason why the linking can't happen today? Cal asked, his cheeks growing hot. I don't know, Shay shrugged. Hush, hush. Remember? Well, what do you know then? All I know is that the Davins want the gifted. Ovette, Cal interrupted. Her name is Ovette. Shay dipped her head before speaking again. The Davins want Ovette, and that is reason enough for us to want to stop them. Pushing herself off the bed, she beckoned for Cal to follow her. Come on, we don't want to keep Jaren waiting. He can be even more impatient than you. Shay led Cal down a long hallway. Pictures of pompous looking people lined the walls. Some were clad in typical merchant outfits, others dressed in what looked like formal military wear. There were even a few paintings of fruit. Why anyone would want a painting of a bowl of fruit hanging on their wall was beyond Cal. Just looking at it was making him hungry all over again. Oh, by the way, what's with you and Jaren's son? Jord, was it? Shay said, thankfully not looking at Cal as he glared at the paintings. Seems like there's more than a little tension there. The question didn't take Cal by surprise. Not really. It was bound to come up sooner or later, and even he had the wherewithal to realize it was better to hash this out before they left for the Citadel. The knots in his stomach returned as he thought about all the times Jord had bullied him or one of the orphans. He likes to think he's better than others, because he was born into this. Cal gestured to the lavish displays of wealth. That such a difference in upbringing existed so close together in the city made that knot tighten. He thinks it's his duty, or right, or whatever, to make sure we never forget the difference. We? Shay asked. Me, Ovette, the kids from the orphanage, and I'm sure a bunch of people I've never met. Can't imagine that scap being any better with anyone else. Envy tinged the spite in Cal's voice, but he didn't care. The envy wasn't the real kind, the kind that would have made Cal regret where he came from. The conveniences Jord had to have grown up with, the daily struggles he'd likely not endured. Such luxury would have made his life easy, and that made Jord weak. Cal's struggles had made him who he was now, for better or worse. Don't you think you're judging him a bit harshly? Surely there's someone he values as a friend. Cal shook his head at her in response. The more he talked with her, the more of a mystery she became. He was used to people hiding things, but he could usually work out why. Maybe not what they wanted, but at least what they wanted from him. But not Shay. One moment she was aloof and purposefully irritating. The next, she'd be somber and almost caring. Now she was judging him for judging Jord? Tell that to Testin and Din, Cal said, walking past her. Well, you're going to need to cool it when we're in there. Jord is an important part of the plan. Without him, we won't be getting anywhere near the gift. Cal looked back as Shay stopped herself. Anywhere near Ovette, she corrected, shooting Cal a wink. Cal opened his mouth to say something, but debating the pros and cons of Jord had already grown wearisome. Shay didn't know what it had been like with him. She'd met him for 5 minutes in a place where he had to be on his best behavior. Whatever. Cal could agree to disagree. He'd let Jord win this round. By the way, I've been meaning to ask, Shay began, stopping in the hallway and leaning into her hip. Where's your brand? Don't have one, Cal replied, his chest growing a little tight. It had taken her longer than most to notice. He always hated this bit, and he hated that he hated it. A small part of him wished she had just not said anything, but it was going to happen sooner or later. Might as well just get it over with. Shay ran her gaze over every inch of Cal, pausing on his hands. He marked her pursed lips, the way she pressed them together into a fine line, figuring out the dark shame he carried around with him wherever he went. You're Hollowborn? She asked, her tone shifting from casual conversation to pointed question. Yeah, Cal replied, stone-faced. Cal waited for the insults, the suspicion. And you still went up against the Lord Inquisitor's hand? And you survived? She looked as though someone had just punched her in the gut. Her expression shifted from disbelief to amazement. I wasn't really thinking about it. I don't really remember what happened, Cal said. The color returned to her face, her amazement making Cal's cheeks flush. Not bad, handsome. She leaned in close, eyeing, enjoying Cal's awkwardness. Never met a Hollowborn before. Turning, she continued down the corridor and stopped outside a nondescript doorway. The frame itself held no significance, but it muffled the sound from inside well enough. Shay held the door ajar and gestured inside with a flick of her head. Come on, can't keep the important people waiting. Muffled but heated voices spilled out through the door, angry, urgent, and overlapping. Gruff tones that belonged to the kind of people who liked to make decisions for those they deemed beneath them. I'm sure this won't be painless at all, Cal muttered, steeling himself as he stepped forward. All eyes were on Cal from the moment he walked in. George scowled at him from the corner of a table, his arms tight across his chest. Behind him, Teston stood with his eyes glued once again to the floor, while Din mimicked his master's gaze. Next to George stood a man to whom he bore a striking resemblance, though a decade or two older. Cal figured that this was Jaren, George's father. Jaren's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as he locked onto Cal, leaving no doubt that he shared his son's disdain. A grin tugged at the corner of Cal's mouth as he thought of Jord relaying all the encounters they'd had over the years. And now that same dirty Hollowborn was in their home, touching, tainting their belongings. Not taking his eyes off Jord, Cal ran his hand over the table, savoring the slight resistance of the polished grain. Shay took her place at the opposite end to Jaren. Sorry we're late. Shall we just pick up where we left off? She said, replacing her playfulness with authority. This was a mask Cal hadn't seen her wear so far. It made her look older, even more sure of herself, deepened the mystery of just who she really was. However, her sudden need to be serious did little to alter Jaren's grimace. I'd rather you start by explaining to me one more time why we need him here with us, Jaren said, stabbing a finger in Cal's direction. His deep voice filled the small space. made it feel even smaller. It carried little emotion, save for disappointment. I'm starting to think you're just making this up as you go along, Shay. Why, Jaren, is that a hint of worry I hear in your voice? Perhaps father was right. Perhaps the Igni cell has grown weak and complacent, too busy stuffing your faces and lining your pockets with the riches given to you by your Daven masters. Papers crumpled as Jaren closed his fist, his white knuckles shaking. I'd watch your tone if I were you, girl. Or what? You'll sell me out to the Davens, too? Shay replied. Jaren slammed his fist down on the table, scattering the documents he'd just crumpled. Talk to me like that again, girl, and it won't be the Davens that send you back to Barkus in a body bag, he growled. Shay's eyes thinned, her lips parted. I wouldn't be here if my father thought you could handle this on your own. The emergence of the Gyfted forced the Lord Inquisitor to leave the safety of the Sanctum Spire. And now that he has her, he'll need to take her to the Citadel to perform the linking. This means he'll be distracted. He'll be vulnerable. She dropped the seriousness from her voice and replaced it with something more alluring, something playful. Not even you could pass up an opportunity like this. Jaren rubbed at his face, thumb and forefinger pinching the bridge of his nose as he gave a long, drawn-out sigh. Look, Cal has already proven himself against the Lord Inquisitor's hand, and he has a personal connection with the Gyfted. He can be of use to us, Shay said. He barely survived, Jord chipped in. Jaren's gaze flicked to the side, his pupils wide as they bored holes in his son for speaking out of turn. But survive he did, Shay said, and that's more than anyone here at this table can say. Her gaze wandered over everyone as she spoke. It was clear from everyone's reaction that they'd heard of Cal's encounter with the man in black armor at the orphanage. The image of his faceplate, the orphanage fire reflected in its shadowy contours, flashed through Cal's head, and his stomach ached in response. And what of the hand? Jaren said. Where is he now? Likely at his master's side, Shay replied. It's rare to see one without the other. Rarer even than seeing either of them at all. And what is your plan for when we come up against him? Throw this child at him again and hope for the best? It was Jaren's turn to take on a mocking tone, although his was far more sinister than Shay's, more violating. I don't care what he's done, George snapped. He'd been trembling the entire time Shay and Jaren were talking. The idiot couldn't stand not being the center of attention. He's nothing but a filthy hollow-born. He had no place among us, he continued, not even bothering to hide his venom. This second outburst was enough to bring his father's gaze upon him in full, and the usually confident and arrogant Jord cowered from the scrutiny. There wasn't much difference in height between the two, but it was clear to everyone who was the boy and who was the man. That's enough out of you, Jared said, his words coming through bared teeth. Just because we need you for this does not mean you are the one in charge. I say who gets to be here. Not you, not anyone else. Me. Do I make myself clear? Jord didn't respond. Not verbally, at least. He held his father's gaze for a few seconds before deciding submission was the better course of action. A small wisp of smoke billowed from the table as Jaren's glowing palm singed the corner of a map. Cal hadn't noticed what was on the table as he entered, too focused instead on the actions from within the room. That had gone about as well as he'd expected. No one had flung any gift his way yet, which was something at least. The layout of an enormous fortress spread out before him on the table. The detailing around the outside looked as though it was built into something. One end had a circular opening that either opened up to the sky or bore down into the earth. Cal couldn't tell. He wasn't sure which part he was meant to be looking at. The same goes for you as well, Shay. Jaren's gruff brought Cal back to the conversation. He was pointing at Shay, his expression bearing the frustration he felt. Shay didn't buckle under his gaze as his son had. Instead, she acted coy, raising her hands and cocking her eyebrow. Jaren turned his powerful gaze on Cal, the crease in his brow deepening as he assessed what he saw. From the look on his face, he didn't see much, but his eyes told Cal something was going on behind the frustration. Felt awful being under his gaze, and try as he might, Cal couldn't help but look elsewhere, at anything else. Can you follow orders, boy? Jaren sneered. My name is Cal replied, trying his best to hide the waver in his voice. Jaren didn't respond. He just continued that awful glare of his. For the briefest of moments, Cal imagined what it must have been like to have grown up under such a gaze. It reminded him of the glare Lady Havisham could give him, only 10 times worse. I can, Cal said, dropping the bravado. There was no point in being defiant with Jaren. Cal needed to focus on what he was here for. He would use Jaren, use all of them, if it meant getting closer to Ovette. Judging from what my idiot son has told me, you can fight well enough, Jaren sneered. Cal wasn't sure if he was being complimented or if Jord was being admonished. He told himself it was likely a bit of both. Tell me, Hollowborn, how well can you handle a blade? I. It took Cal a second to answer. He'd always thought of himself as a fighter, but recent events had shown him how little he knew. I can learn. Jaren's glare deepened. Learn. He waved a dismissive hand in Cal's direction. What good are you in a fight if you can't swing a sword? How are you planning on going up against someone who can channel? People rely on the gift too much. Makes them stupid. If you can get in close, you can attack before they have a chance to do anything. That didn't work on the hand. Now did it? Jaren's voice was low, accusing. No. A flutter of anxiety passed through Cal's chest. He didn't want to prove himself to Jaren, but he needed to prove he could be useful to the mission. He had to. But it worked on your son. Jaren grunted in response before returning to the fortress layout. This was as much of a signal of acceptance as this man would ever give out, Cal thought to himself. Listen up, Jaren said. If Shay's intel is correct. It is, Shay interrupted. She smirked at Cal and shot him another wink. Then our window of opportunity is coming up. We don't have time for second guesses and doubts. If any of you want out, now is the time to leave this room. Jaren scanned the room again, taking his time to look at each individual present. He paused on someone Cal hadn't noticed yet. A boy, younger than Cal, innocent looking, with mousy brown hair and a pair of oversized and over-repaired spectacles. Soot and oil smears covered his overalls, with several tools poking out of its many pockets. Jaren gave the young boy a curt nod, and given the last few minutes in his presence, Cal figured this might be the only sign of affection the man was capable of. The whoosh of paper brought Cal's attention back to the table. Jaren had removed the top map, revealing a more detailed layout of what he assumed was the fortress in question. None of us have ever been inside the citadel before. All we know is that it lies deep within Igni's heart, the center of the volcano, Jaren said. But That's where the smelt mines are, Cal said. Correct, Jaren said, his words clipped and tinged with frustration. George shot Cal a look of daggers from behind his father, and Shay coughed through a snigger. Thanks to my son, we've procured uniforms, armor, and everything else for a small team to wander through the mines unnoticed. To the common laborer, you'll look like any other prefect. George stood a little taller and looked a little prouder as his father spoke. Cal couldn't help but roll his eyes. This was the longest he and Jord had spent in the same place. Definitely the longest without them coming to blows. Once we're through the mines, we'll be in unknown territory, Jaren continued, tracing his finger through the corridors on the map. Cal tried to follow, but he wasn't sure which way was up and which way was down. Everyone around him watched Jaren's finger with rapt attention, so he pretended to do the same. However, Artemis here thinks he knows where the Lord Inquisitor will be. Artemis? Jaren gestured to the young boy in the corner, who was already in the process of laying out another map with yet another layout of another building. This side of rebellion was alien to Cal. He never could have imagined being a rebel would require so much planning, so much talking. A flush of heat crept up the back of his neck as he thought of the times he'd tried and failed to hinder the prefects that patrolled the embers. Up until now, he'd thought of himself as a rebel, a menace that the Davins were aware of. Being here, among real rebels, showed him just how little he knew, how much of a child he still was. Shrugging off the feeling, he returned his attention to Artemis. We all know the Great Chain runs into the heart of the volcano, but have any of us stopped to wonder where the chain came from? Or what purpose it serves? Artemis stopped to take in everyone's reaction. He was trying to mirror Jaren's gravitas, but his voice lacked the same gravel or pitch. Jaren paralyzed others with the glare of a predator waiting to make his move. Artemis's frown in comparison could have only been considered cute. He reminded Cal of the Littles. Anyone? No? Artemis continued. Exactly. We have all accepted that they are a part of our world. But what if there's some deeper connection with them and the gift? I mean, where did the gift come from? Why do some of us have it and some of us don't? Is it infinite? A resource that replenishes itself? Or will we one day run out of gift and be forced to live as Hollowborn? Cal gritted his teeth at the last comment, deciding it was better not to speak out of turn again. Get to the point, Jaren snapped. He balled his hands into fists, breathing heavily through his nose. Right. Apologies, Artemis replied, pushing his glasses back into place. There must be a point where the chain connects to the land, somewhere beyond the smelt mines, a point where one can touch the chain. That is where the gifted must be being held. The Lord Inquisitor is likely there as well. But why there? Cal asked. Not able to hold himself back, he continued. Why would Ovette be taken there? I'm glad you asked. Artemis beamed at the chance to further explain himself. The volcano and its destructive capabilities are a natural phenomenon. Here, and at other places like it, the gift would be different, more potent. I doubt this would make much difference for a regular giftling, as the limitations for channeling gift are set by our physical bodies. But the gifted is not held to such limitations. And the chain? Cal asked, trying his best to keep up. I was just coming to that. I believe the chains are a conduit for the gift. Much like a giftling, I believe they absorb it. However, I'm afraid I do not know the purpose for this absorption. I have theories, but without the relevant data, I am unable to draw any definitive conclusions. Right. This was all Cal could think to say. Talk of the gift and the chain is all well and good, but what about the sides of the citadel? The entrance? How do we get inside? Jord asked. Jaren didn't admonish his son for the interruption this time. In fact, his lips were parted, as though he had been just about to voice similar questions. The smelt mines burrow deep into the volcano. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the citadel is probably beyond the mine's deepest point, Artemis replied, directing his comment more to Jord than anyone else. The look Jord returned him offered all anyone needed to know about their relationship, or lack thereof. It was good to know there were other people who didn't follow Jord's every whim. The uniforms I provided will only get us so far. There's no way for us to know whether or not the prefects guarding the citadel wear different ones. Without such markings, we'll stand out, George said. Well then, we'll have to improvise. Shay's fingers gently brushed the edge of her jawline, as though she were tracing the contours of some unspoken idea. She'd remained quiet since her verbal match with Jaren, her posture both relaxed and alert at the same time. Once you're in, Cal will guard the entrance, while the rest of you find your way to the Lord Inquisitor, Jaren added. Cal's heart skipped a beat as the words sank in, and he was on his feet before he could stop himself. What? Guard the entrance? What about Ovette? I'm here to get her out. The words fell one after another. His chest was tight as it rose and fell in quick succession. The Gyfted is not your concern, Jaren said, not even looking in Cal's direction. Not my concern? Cal spat. If you want to be part of this mission, you need to learn your place, boy, Jaren snapped, still looking down at the map in front of him. I know my place, old man. It's by Ovette's side. Getting her out of whatever the Davins have in store for her. Cal's cheeks burned as he spoke. You sound like you don't even care about her. Jaren slammed his fist onto the table, silencing the room. You're right. I don't. The veins in his neck bulged as he crossed the space. He stopped right in front of Cal, so close that Cal could smell the burnt tobacco and cheap wine on his breath. It was only now, being this close to him, that Cal noticed the flush in his cheeks and on the tip of his nose. What is one little girl to me when I have hundreds of lives to worry about? He threw his arm back, gesturing to everyone in the room. Their lives mean more to me than some fanciful little lass who I've never even met. I couldn't give fire and spit that she's the Gyfted. She is not the target. Flecks of spittle rained on Cal as Jaren spat his words. If she's not part of the plan, then why am I even here? Something warm and wet ran down Cal's cheek, and it took him a second to realize what it was. His throat closed off, stopping him from saying anything else. His body shook at the thought of not being there for Ovette. Good point. Jaren seethed, his stale breath wafting with every breathy syllable. He jerked his head to the side and stabbed a finger into Cal's chest. Get this shit out of my sight! Cal barged out of the room before anyone could respond, not needing to hear anything else Jaren had to say. Storming down the hallway, he tried in vain to push down the tightness in his chest. Cal grabbed anything he thought would be useful and threw it into a bag. A change of clothes, the dagger Lady Havisham had given him, and a few more of the ration packs that Shay had left behind. How dare Jaren say Ovette wasn't Cal's concern? What did he know? Some rich scap just deciding who's important and who's not? The door to the room creaked open, and Cal spun on his heels, his jaw clenched and his fists ready, half expecting another confrontation. Instead, he found Artemis hovering in the doorway, his expression timid, eyes darting to avoid direct contact. He held a metal tray topped with bandages and bottles filled with a clear liquid, their labels peeling and barely legible. Can I come in? He said. The bottles on the tray clinked as he shifted on his feet, as if he were deciding whether or not to enter. The thumping pulse in Cal's head subsided, along with his desire to berate someone. He cleared his throat and turned back to his packing, hoping the redness in his cheeks had begun to fade. The shuffle of feet and the clink of glass let him know Artemis had entered. The latch clicked loudly as Artemis closed the door behind him, making the room feel a whole lot smaller. Shay told me you were hurt and that I should help clean your wounds, so here I am. Artemis gave a weak chuckle, trying his best to sound friendly despite his obvious nerves. If you could just, remove your tunic, I can begin. His shoes scuffed against the floorboards as he moved, and his breath held a lightness as he drew closer. Cal relaxed his shoulders as he turned, his posture softening to appear as non-confrontational as possible. He kept his arms folded, but try as he might, he couldn't fully quell the simmering anger in his chest, like a low burn just waiting to flare up again. Artemis's demeanor was different from earlier. During the meeting, he had seemed confident and giddy, a confidence that belonged to someone older and more experienced. Not that Cal had any idea how experienced Artemis was. For all he knew, this unassuming boy could be a stone cold killer. Now, though, all he saw was a teenager barely into his gift. His brand looked awkward, like it was two sizes too big. His fingers fumbled over the glass bottles, shaking as he tried to find the right one. Cal felt sorry for him. Your name's Artemis, right? Cal softened his voice, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his performative calm. The idea of leaving Ovette to the care of Jaren and his crew sat like hot coals in his throat. But this kid didn't deserve any of his aggression. Not yet, anyway. Artemis flicked his gaze up for a moment before returning it to the bottles. Cal's brow tightened, deepening the furrow that was already there. Gentle voice or no, he wasn't going to get any answers from the boy if he kept his expression all fire and thunder. Sorry, Cal said, rubbing a hand over his face. It's just been a long day. How about we start from the top? He held out his hand, low enough for Artemis's gaze to catch it. I'm Cal. It took a few seconds, but Artemis lifted his head, taking Cal's hand in his. Artie, he muttered. Not Artemis? Uh, you can call me that if you prefer. What do you prefer? Cal asked. Artie. Artie it is, then. Cal gripped his hand a little tighter, wobbling Artie's entire arm with a firm shake. Wandering over to the bed, Cal removed his tunic, wincing as the fabric peeled away the bandages Shay had placed earlier. Dark red and brown stains made it sticky and dry all at once. Artie set the tray of medical supplies down on the bed and knelt at Cal's side. The herbal smell from the liquid in the bottles brought back memories of Lady Havisham pouring tea for Leif, telling him it'd do good for his aging bones. Cal's chest ached as he pulled his attention away from the scent, leaving him hollow. Artie's two big brands started to glow, and translucent wisps of green flittered between his fingertips. He directed the wisps to the liquid inside the bottles, and it swirled, snaking its way onto the cleanest rag Cal had ever seen. Without taking his eyes off Cal's wound, Artie flicked his wrist, and the soaked rag floated toward Cal. Cal clenched his jaw, a sharp hiss escaping through his teeth as the cold rag pressed against his wound. Sorry, Artie stuttered. It's fine, Cal gritted, his eyes watering from the pain. I'm impressed you were able to walk around with this. Whatever you did pulled all the stitches out. He leaned in closer to inspect the newly opened wound, his voice dropping to a mutter. Not like she did a very good job, though. His gaze flicked nervously to Cal's face. Don't tell her I said that, please. Tell her you said what? Shay's voice accompanied the opening of the door. The thud of her boots on the floorboard followed as she entered the room. Cal's cheeks flushed and his eyes flicked toward his tunic lying next to him. Thankfully, Shay didn't seem to notice. Ah, Nothing? Artie chuckled. How's our hero doing? Should I call time of death? Shay joked. She leaned herself against a chest of drawers that looked like it cost more than anything in Ovette and Cal's secret spot. You knew, didn't you? Cal said, his voice low and accusing. You knew what Jaren had planned for me. Yes, Shay answered. Simple and clean. No bullshit friendliness or playful tone. You should have told me. Why? What difference would that have made? Because then I wouldn't be wasting my time here. I could have just gone straight to the Citadel. Straight to Ovette. You had no idea where it was. You still don't. I would have managed. No, Cal, you wouldn't have. Her words were clipped, her expression like stone. All you would have found is a quick death. You're not the daring rogue you think you are. Yeah? And you're. Ow! Pain prickled its way through Cal's side as Artie pushed a needle through reddened skin, a thin piece of wire string tied into a loop at the end. Cal did his best to ignore how raw the exposed area felt. Artie, can you give Cal and me a minute? Shay said. Artie looked away from his work, his fingers tipped with blood. Fine. Just make sure the wound is covered. Otherwise, it'll just open back up again. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but quickly closed his mouth. Instead, he shuffled out of the room as fast and unawkwardly as he could. Part of Cal wished he'd stayed, if only to make him feel less embarrassed about being topless. Shay waited for the click of the door closing before turning her attention back to Cal. She raised a finger to her lips, hushing him before he could say anything. Listen, your guarding the entrance is just part of the plan. I said I'd help you get to your Ovette, and I meant it. But Jaren, Cal started, confused by the immediate change in her tone. You let me handle Jaren, she interrupted. But we have to get one thing clear. The Lord Inquisitor comes first. Cal didn't respond. He wasn't sure what to say. After we take him out, there'll be nothing stopping you, us, from mounting a daring rescue, will there? I still don't trust you, Cal said. Honestly, that's probably smart. Shay sighed as she pushed herself off the chest of drawers and sat down next to Cal, edging closer to him. If you want out, you can leave. I won't try to stop you. But this plan requires 6 people. We need you, Cal. She was close. Cal hadn't noticed how good she smelled before. Clean. Stirring. He jolted as she placed her hand on his. I know this isn't how you envisioned rescuing Ovette, but this is the way. The best way. She kept her tone soft, almost sincere. I'm sorry if it felt like I was misleading you. I really wasn't trying to. Cal couldn't respond. His mind raced, but no words formed. He felt small and powerless next to her. Shay sighed again, longer this time. Just think about what I said, okay? Besides, oh, I nearly forgot, she said, pushing herself off the bed. Her sudden burst of excitement was enough for Cal to lift his head. Forgot what? Her devious grin returned, and she ducked out of the room, quickly returning with a long bundle of cloth. She propped it up against the chest of drawers she'd leaned on, the bottom hitting the floorboard with a thud. Try not to lose this again. Pretty sure Leif would have both our heads. Her grin widened as she left the room, turning her head one last time to see Cal's reaction. Good night, Cal. Cal pulled on the piece of string that had bound the bundle together. The cloth fell away, revealing a long since cared for sword, the blade darkened and dull. The pain in his stomach washed away, replaced instead by a lump in his throat and the thread of tears he'd been holding back since he'd gotten here. Cal startled awake, his heart racing as he blinked away the remnants of sleep. Confusion gave way to a flicker of shame, as he hadn't meant to doze off. Whatever Artie had done, whatever ointments or solutions he'd used, had all but numbed the pain in his stomach. It still throbbed every now and then, the body's way of telling him his heart was still working. Rubbing sleep from his eyes, he forced himself to get up. Leif's sword was propped up against the end of the bed, silent, watchful. The longer Cal stared at the blade, the more it seemed to draw him in. The silence deafened the room, the kind that presses down on you, makes you uncomfortable, too aware of yourself. Cal ran his fingers down the face of the blade, trying to imagine Leif wielding it as a younger man. The steel was cold to the touch, and despite the nicks and cracks that marred the blade's edge, telling stories of countless battles, it retained its sharpness. He held the blade across his palm, his sweaty fingers gripping the hilt tight. It was lighter than he remembered, though still heavy. The ointments Artie had used must have helped him. Still, the dull sheen of the blade made Cal want to believe otherwise. It was only now, staring at this blackened blade, that he realized how similar it looked to the dagger Lady Havisham had given him. Setting the sword down, he picked up the dagger to compare. Though smaller in size and shape, the two blades were identical. This realization sent a cold sensation that crept toward the base of his spine. He shrugged off the feeling, deciding food and thanking Shay were the order of business. The food packet she'd left served as a fine enough breakfast, and someone had left a jug of water at the side of the bed. Cal's face flushed at the idea of someone serving him. Did they not know what he was? Stepping out into the corridor, he made for the only other room in this house he knew, hoping Shay was there, or at the very least, someone who knew where she was. The room looked empty, the early morning light drifting through the pulled curtains. The table had been cleared of any papers or fortress layouts, the chorus of opinions absent. The empty room felt odd. How many rebel plans had this room seen? How many victories or failures had it endured? The rustle of papers from an adjoining room broke Cal out of his daze. Shay? Cal called as he entered. I just wanted to thank. Oh, she's not here, hollow-born, George snapped, not looking up from one of the map layouts from yesterday's conversation. The conversation Cal had been ejected from. He was dressed in a blue-gray undershirt, the material looking cheap and uncomfortable compared to the finery he usually liked to flaunt. The rest of the prefect armor lay to the side, waiting to be donned. Why aren't you dressed in uniform? Shay didn't tell you? Cal asked, surprised that nothing had been said. Tell me what? Why hadn't Shay said anything? Was she hoping he'd come around? He hadn't. He still had no intention of playing guard duty while they screwed around in the Citadel. Ovette was the only thing that mattered, and that hadn't changed. She had to know that hadn't changed. So why hadn't she told Jord he wasn't coming? Nothing, Cal said, trying his best to sound coy. Do you know where she is? Likely in Father's study going over last-minute preparations, or getting herself ready for the mission. Unlike some. George shot Cal a derisive look, then returned to the layout. Right. Cal turned, not having the energy to deal with Jord. I'll find her myself. I'd watch myself around her if I were you. His voice dripped with the usual loathing, but this time it didn't feel directed toward Cal. At least not entirely. Cal turned back, locking eyes with Jord. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. She is dangerous, and nothing good will come of fraternizing with someone like her. Careful, Jord. You almost sound like you're starting to care about me. Jord tugged at the bottom of his uncomfortable looking undershirt, his posture straightening. What do you think she is here for? To take out that Inquisitor guy. Precisely. Taking out someone like that is going to require an individual with a particular set of skills. Skills that he cast a gaze over Cal, his disgust obvious, and certainly you do not possess. I've seen some of her abilities. So what? Ignis breath, you're stupid, he scoffed. She's an assassin, you idiot hollowborn. It made sense. The way she manipulated the gift, her aloofness, the look on her face when she'd killed that guard. It was her job to be disconnected, to not care about the kill. The thought sent a shiver down Cal's spine. So she's an assassin. What's that got to do with me? Cal asked, the pit in his stomach widening. The gifted is a powerful boon to the Daven Empire. They cannot be allowed to use her. Then why isn't getting her back part of the plan? Cal asked. The answer was obvious. He already knew what Jord was going to say. He just needed to hear it. If Shay cannot get to the Lord Inquisitor, she has a secondary target, Jord uttered. His tone was low, as if even he didn't want to admit the truth out loud. To not give the act life. To not make it real. She's to ensure the use of the gifted power is impossible. Say it, Cal said, his hands balled into fists. Say it. Shay is here to kill Ovette. Dun, dun, dun. Oh no, everyone. Oh no. Oh no. Oh yeah. You know, all I could think of when I said it, and I imagine it may have been the same for you guys. You'll have to let me know. Taking her out requires an individual with a particular set of skills. Skills earned over a lifetime of work. Skills that make me a menace to people like you. Who else just heard, Liam Neeson from Taken when when he was saying a particular set of skills? It couldn't just be me, right? What are you gonna do? You've got to love it. So, for those of you guys who were here with me and have managed to tune in tonight or through the previous one, what do you guys think of Gifted so far? This is another debut novel by a indie author, D.W. Lewis. What do you guys think of it? Are you enjoying it? Is it everything that you hoped it would be? Is it nothing like you hoped it would be? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? Thoughts? Comments? Opinions? Remember, if you do miss anything tonight, all of the previous chapters will be up on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. Like, comment, subscribe. Help me to share this story with the world. And now we'll get into what will probably be our final chapter of the evening, because these chapters are running 30 to 40 minutes long, maybe a little bit longer because we're almost an hour and we're a little over an hour and 50 minutes into the stream. So let's get one more chapter down, and then, unless this one's really short, we'll probably call it here for the evening and pick it back up on Tuesday. Are you guys ready? I am ready. Let's get started with 7. Crouched behind the others, Cal's breathing quickened as he watched Shay dispatch two guards without making a sound. Their bodies, wreathed in shadow, hit the ground with a muffled thump. It was difficult for him to tear his eyes away. Without so much as batting a pretty eyelid, Shay wiped her daggers clean on one of the guard's lapels and stowed them. Cal pulled on the straps that held the prefect armor in place, the metal digging into his shoulders. There hadn't been time to adjust them before coming here, and the heat radiating from the smelt mines didn't help. It amazed him how little attention the miners had paid to them as they passed through the igneous smelt mines. Most had refused to make eye contact or even look their way. Either patrolling prefects was a common sight or a common source of anxiety. Cal didn't know, but he could guess. Shay returned to the group and whispered something to Jaren. Cal was too far behind to hear what she said, but she shot him a look as soon as she was finished. Grunting, Jaren handed Shay what looked like a flat black box, then beckoned for Jord and Artie to follow him. Shay crept toward Cal and batted away his fidgeting hands and tightened one of the straps he'd been playing with. It helped a little, but the armor still felt wrong. Jaren and Jord looked like they were made for it, or it was made for them. Either way, it suited them, but not Cal. You know, you don't look half bad in uniform, Shay said, her smirk widening as she patted the strap. Cal grunted a noncommittal, thanks, and shuffled to the other side of her, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. What? Not used to pretty girls giving you compliments? Cal didn't answer. The dark and broody thing will only get you so far. Shay leaned closer, too close, her scent wafting again. Different this time. Floral. Eventually, you have to respond. I just want to focus, Cal uttered, not looking at her. He could feel her gaze on him, the same flippant gaze that showed everyone just how little she cared. Once we're inside, we split into two teams, right? That's correct. Artemis will be counting on you to deal with any threats along the way. Yeah, well, if everyone does their job, it won't come to that, right? Seriously, Cal, you're adorable. Did she have to be that close? Cal pushed Shay back, creating a little distance between them. Let's just get this over with. Fine, have it your way. Shay pouted, not taking her gaze off Cal. She took Cal's arm and placed a black box in his hand. Upon closer inspection, he could see 5 small holes on one side. It was slick and cold. Not stone, not metal. Smelt, maybe? What's this? Shay stared at him as if he'd asked a stupid question. Not the first she'd done that, and something told Cal it wouldn't be the last. It's a vox. A vox? I don't know what that is, Cal said, feeling more than a little stupid. It'll help us stay in contact throughout the Citadel. Really? Cal said, amazement overriding his stupidity. How does it work? He turned the box over in his hand, not sure what he was looking for. He'd never seen anything like this before. Never been far away from anyone to need one. Oh, so now you're interested. So much for, I just want to focus, Shay said, imitating Cal's voice. Cal shot her as a look as dangerous as he could give her. He clenched his jaw, hardening his resolve. He refused to be swayed by her games again. He'd told Shay he agreed with her plan, but he wasn't about to let her get anywhere near Ovette. Shay giggled at his expression, not fazed in the least. Come on, killer, she said, as she began to step forward. The name stung, a sharp reminder of what he'd done. He swallowed the guilt, pushing the sting down deep. There would be a time to deal with it later. If there was a later. Jaren and the others waited at the entrance to the Citadel. Jaren eyed Cal and Shay as they crept forward. Even within the confines of the volcano, the entrance to the citadel towered above them. The walls were gray, mottled with black specks. Thousands of them. Cal ran his hand along the wall. The surface was smooth and unnaturally cold. Nice to see you two are done flirting, Jaren growled, aiming the comment more toward Shay than to Cal. Sorry, Jaren. Won't happen again, Shay replied, her tone light as she flashed Jaren a grin. Damn right it won't. From here on out, you both do what I say when I say it. Are we clear on that? Again, Cal could swear the comment was more for Shay, but this time she didn't respond. She winked at Cal and waited for Jaren to continue. Jord, Shay, you're with me. Artemis, take the Hollowborn with you to the control room. You're on controls. He's on guard duty. Got it, squeaked Artie, his cheeks reddening at the crackle in his voice. Not that Jaren noticed. Take care of whatever security measures they have in place along the way to the chain room, and make sure you don't forget to kill the lights. We'll need the cover. I know what I need to do, Artie replied, his posture stiffening as he tried to look more confident. All right, let's do this. For Eudos. For the rebellion. See you on the other side, handsome, Shay said, giving Cal one last wink. The halls of the citadel mirrored the outside, the walls a dull, oppressive gray that stretched on, broken only by sharp corners. Glass tubes filled with gift lit the corridors with bright light, the substance thick and unnatural. The air was a cool reprieve from the blazing heat outside, but a tingle crept further down Cal's spine with each breath. They were unwelcome here. Artemis, Cal, control room is that way. Jaren knelt beside the corner wall, gesturing in the opposite direction. Go. No noise. On it, Artie chimed, setting off without hesitation. Cal followed, taking one last look behind him. Shay offered a wink before disappearing around another corner with Jaren and Jord. Artie took corners with confidence, and it didn't take him long to find the control room door. It emanated the same coldness as the rest of the citadel. No visible handle, no seams of any kind, just a bulwark of blackened metal set into gray walls. Artie ran his hand along the metal, searching for something. He stopped near the center of the door, and a familiar green hue limed his hand. The inner workings of the door began to churn, the grinding echoing throughout the corridor. Artie breathed hard as he worked, and finally the door gave and the metal split apart, revealing an enormous open space. Catwalks crisscrossed above a lake of molten slag, all converging on a central platform. To the sides, thick pipes glowing with an orange hue snaked and coiled around each other, exiting the room at different points. Cal wiped the sweat from his forehead, the coolness of the corridors absent here. Artie, unfazed, made straight for the central platform, running along the catwalk without a second's hesitation. Cal took a step forward, expecting the metal rung of the catwalk to be hot as he gripped the railing for balance. The heights buffeted him with a wave of dizziness and nausea. Forcing himself to look ahead, Cal took a step forward, and then another. If Artie could do this, then he could too. At the control panel, Artie's fingers danced across a hodgepodge of flashing lights, miniature levers, and beeping gauges. His brand continued to glow, and every now and then a button out of reach clicked as if pushed by a spectral finger. I hope you know what you're doing, Cal said, not sure where or what he was supposed to be looking at. Please, Artie responded, utterly in his element. What are you doing exactly? I'm enabling remote functionality to several security measures and disabling anything that could be considered an impediment to our companion's progress throughout this facility, Artie said, emotionless and matter of fact. Um, oh, right. Sorry, he chuckled. I am opening the doors and turning off the Citadel wide alarm systems. Won't that look suspicious? Cal asked, taking a step back. Not at all. Systems such as these often require several rounds of maintenance to ensure they run in peak condition. Our presence here will go unnoticed, at least system wise. It shall. You said remote function. Whatever. How will that work? I have little time to engage in the dynamics of gift born control methods. However, the simple version would be that I can control it using my gift. Right. That sounds good, Cal said, feeling sheepish. Doesn't it? Artie chimed, pleased with himself. Several tense minutes dragged by before voices echoed from the other side of a nearby door. It hissed open, and a pair of prefects, deep in mid discussion, stepped through. Artie, we've got company, Cal whispered, not taking his eyes off the approaching guards. Artie didn't pause, instead continuing his barrage of button mashing. I'm doing my job. Time for you to do yours. Kill them? I I don't think I can do that. Cal's voice was strained, coming close to breaking his whisper. Whatever you consider necessary, Artie replied. Cal checked the dagger at his belt, shrugged against a sword strapped to his back, and made himself look as inconspicuous as he could. After all, a good thief needed to know how to blend into his environment. Cal wasn't about to rob these idiots, but he figured the same principle applied. His chest tightened at the thought of killing again, at the image of the dead prefect's stare flashing in his mind. He swallowed hard, nausea surging as the guards drew closer. He locked eyes with one of the guards as they approached. The guard offered a curt nod when he passed. Cal nodded back and then turned back to Artie, willing them to keep walking. Wait a second. A gruff voice from behind him called. The timbre of his voice made him sound old and tired. You look familiar. What regiment are you from? Regiment? Cal stuttered, feeling exposed. The guard walked up and removed his helmet, revealing a face lined by experience, his dark stubble lanced with white. I swear I've seen you somewhere before. The second guard, red hair poking out of the sides and back of her helmet, chuckled. He's likely one of the new recruits they brought in yesterday. You know, the folk from Undine. Look at him. He barely fits into his armor. How old are you, kid? 18? Cal replied. 18? Ignis breath. You're barely off your mother's teat. What are you doing joining the prefects? Family to feed, Cal continued, his throat growing drier by the second. Don't we all? The woman said, replacing her helmet and shoving her partner in the arm. Come on, leave the baby to his first assignment. Let's hit the mess hall. The older guard eyed Cal for a second longer, looking like he wanted to say something. The tightness in Cal's chest sank as the prefect, with a grunt, followed his partner through the doors Cal and Artie had entered through. Cal took a few deep breaths before returning to Artie. That was close, he said, more to himself. Yes. I am pleased they did not interrupt our work. Your performance was adequate. Tell me, have you always possessed performative talents? Uh, I guess. Kinda had to pretend a lot growing up. Pretend what? Well, that I wasn't me for a start. An orphan? Artie asked, still deep in his work. A hollowborn, Cal replied, peering over the railing into the fiery chasm below. Ah. The clack of pushed buttons paused. And this Gyfted, Ovette. She's an orphan too? Yeah, we grew up together. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. Because of her capture? No, that's not really what I meant. It doesn't matter. Are you nearly finished? Cal replied, pushing himself off the railing and gesturing toward the control panel. The Vox crackled to life before Artie could respond. Shay's voice came through, distant and empty. Cal, Artie, you there? Cal unhooked the Vox and held it up in front of him, unsure what he should do next. Artie cleared his throat and gestured how to use the device. Cal brought his lips toward the 5 small holes. Yes, yes, we're here. Great. We had a small run-in with a patrol, but it was nothing we couldn't handle. Cal looked down at the box as Shay spoke and over to Artie, who offered him a thumbs up and a wide grin. Tell Artie we're in position. As soon as he cuts the power, we'll make our move. Artie pottered over to the control panel and rotated a small valve. The lights dimmed, and the distant groan of the volcano subsided. Great work, Shay's voice whispered. Jaren, Jord, on my... With a flash, the lights reignited. A klaxon alarm blared, the volcano roaring back to life. Cal jerked his head toward Artie, his face stern as his fingers flew across the control panel. Artie, what's happening? Cal asked, his muscles flooding with nervous energy. I don't know, Artie stammered. I don't know. Cal pressed down hard on the box, the cold metal feeling hotter than it had a few moments before. Shay, can you hear me? Something has gone wrong. Shay! No answer. Cal stared at the box, his mind racing with half-formed ideas of what to do next. Cal, you need to get to the chain room. Oved is in danger, Artie said, his attention now directed toward Cal. What? Did you know Shay would target her if things went wrong? It doesn't take a genius to figure it out. If the primary target cannot be eliminated, then eliminating his most valuable resource would, at the very least, deter any immediate repercussions. Why bring me along if that was the plan? How did you all think I would react? Cal clenched and unclenched his sweaty palms, his throat burning with restrained anger. Follow the corridor we came through back to the junction, Artie said, gesturing pathways with straightened hands. She mentioned a skirmish between her party and some unknown individuals, presumably prefects. Their remains should lead you in the direction you need to go. Why help me? Cal seethed. The way I see it, you have 2 options. Stay here and listen to why targeting the Gyfted makes strategic sense, or go and save your friend. Cal spun on his heel, allowing the burn in his throat to wash over him. No one was going to take Ovette from him a second time. No one. Cal's sprint echoed through the uniform gray corridors. The weight of his sword dug into his back, and his loose armor bounced against his chest. He didn't care. There wasn't time to think, only to run faster. He rounded a corner to the sight of 6 dead prefects. Their bodies bore a mix of large gashes, scorched skin, and dagger-sized holes. He was on the right track. From behind him, a familiar female voice called out, Hey, rookie, hold up! Cal turned, ice flooding his veins. The same 2 prefects from the control room, now accompanied by others, jogged toward him. The red-haired prefect removed her helmet, allowing her bundled hair to fall once again. Where you off to? Huh? You're missing all the action, she said, jabbing him in the stomach with her elbow. Looks like baby's first assignment won't be so dull after all. Behind her, one of the other prefects tore off his helmet, pointing an accusing finger at Cal. It's you! You're supposed to be dead! What are you bleeding on about? The redhead replied, as the older, tired-looking prefect slowly drew his sword, recognition glinting through the slit in his helmet. The kid from the orphanage, Mycon's killer! It's him! There was a slight pause before the prefects exploded into action. The redhead and her tired-looking comrade dropped into precise military combat stance, while Cal fumbled with his sword. Behind him, the outstretched palms of the other prefects glowed red, blue, and green. Cal stepped back, unsure of whom to target. He tilted the tip of his blade between them, noting how much lighter it felt. The nicked edges remained, but the sword felt like it belonged to him. The leather grip tighter somehow. Familiar. The block of prefects advanced, each step precise and intentional. In a flash, the redhead dropped low and swung at Cal's feet. Surprising himself, he deflected the blow with the flat of his blade, unbalancing her. As he readied to kick to her face, a bolt of fire collided with his armor, the flames licking at his exposed neck and searing his skin. The redhead stood, and another prefect sent a bolt of blue ice at Cal. In a panic, he raised his sword, shielding his face. The icy bolt careened off the blade, exploding into glass-like shards against the wall beside him. Cal stared at his sword in amazement, remnants of the gift disappearing as if being sucked into the blade. With renewed confidence, he brought his sword to bear, ready for the next strike. Before anyone could move, a door slammed shut, inches from the tip of Cal's sword. "You're welcome," Artie's voice crackled through the Vox. It took Cal a moment to process what had happened, and another to realize he was wasting time. Cal skidded to a halt as he entered the chain room. At the far end, Ignis' chain, or at least a section of it, speared the floor and ceiling of the room, its runes throbbing with an intense, angry glow. The volcano's heart bathed the links in angry reds and oranges. Ovette knelt at the base of the chain, a smaller, ethereal chain snaking its way around her body, connecting her to the larger one. She screamed in pain as the chain jerked. Her body convulsed as if being crushed. "Ovette!" Cal screamed. "Cal, we need you!" Shay shouted, rasping for breath. Her voice was strained with effort. The clash of blades drew Cal's attention to Shay and Jaren, locked in a desperate fight with the Lord Inquisitor. Shay looked exhausted, her face drenched in sweat. Jaren didn't look much better. His face and arms were covered in small cuts, a new one forming with each failed deflection. Jord lay a few feet away from them both, cradling a bloody gash at his side. "Hollow, get here now!" Jaren cried, barely parrying the Lord Inquisitor's blade to the side, and then missing with his counter swing. Cal struggled to follow the speed of the Lord Inquisitor. His blade was an onyx blur as he slashed and struck with inhuman speed. He looked to be around the same age as Leif, but moved as if he were a much younger man. "Ah!" Ovette cried out in pain once more, her arms constricted at her side. The ethereal chain pulsed in concert with the runes on Ignis' chain. Faint white light passed through it each time Ovette cried out. Cal's limbs surged with energy, any fatigue vanishing. The sensation was familiar, the nervous energy before a fight. But this time it was different. Potent. It fueled his movement, propelled him forward as he rushed toward Ovette. "Ovette, I'm here," he said, eyes darting over her. Pain jolted through his arm as he grabbed the ethereal chain, a searing agony that felt like fire coursing through his veins. The chain pulsed with malevolent energy, its hatred palpable, directed, as if it were an attack directed at him. Ovette screamed again, her eyes shut tight against the pain. Whatever was hurting him was hurting her. His Ovette. He couldn't waste another second. He gripped the chain as tight as he could. Something connected with him. Something hateful and angry. It wanted him dead. Cal screamed in pain, his blood feeling as though it had been set ablaze. He would get lost in the pain if he didn't do something, if he didn't fight back. With a roar that tore at his throat, he pulled the chain taut, raised his sword, and cut through the ethereal chain, severing the link. Ovette crumpled to the floor as the chain around her dissipated, but Cal remained rooted to the spot. What remained of the ethereal chain wrapped itself around his forearm. It seared through his bracer, dissolving the metal. Cal screamed again as the chain reached his skin, his flesh searing and bubbling. The pain brought him to his knees, his mind awash with anguish, hate, suffering. He struggled to keep focus. In the chaos, a voice boomed with a timbre that rattled his sanity. It spoke in a language he didn't recognize, but the intention was clear. It saw him. It felt him. It knew who he was. And it hated him. It was going to kill him. No! Cal yelled, struggling to his feet. The pain remained, but he forced himself to focus. Digging his teeth into his lip, blood seeping into his mouth, he took a step toward Igni's chain, and then another. He raised his sword, tip pointed at the massive chain. The voice intensified, the sound echoing in his mind. It knew what he was about to do. Using the last of his strength, Cal charged toward the giant chain, sword held in front of him. The blade pierced the black, light-absorbing material, the runes flaring as he pushed with all his weight. The sword crawled deeper, cutting through the blackness. Cal pushed harder, crying out with effort. The sword sliced through the remainder of the chain, cutting the link in two. The voice in his head boomed one last time before fading just as quickly as it had arrived. The pain in his forearm subsided, leaving only soreness as the ethereal chain dissipated. Cal stood frozen for a moment, locked in a pose, the world quiet around him. The fighting of his companions muted. It started as a low hum, but grew into a deafening crescendo. The roar of the volcano. A shockwave of gift blasted into Cal, sending him and Ovette tumbling back. Shay and the others let out panicked cries as the room began to rumble, sections of the ceiling crashing down with incredible force. Ovette lay a few feet from Cal, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. Cal tried to move, tried to crawl toward her, but his body refused to obey. He had nothing left. The distant sound of explosions, the rising quake beneath him, the crumbling of the room around him. He didn't care. He kept his eyes on Ovette for as long as he could. The edges of his vision darkened. The void crept in to take over. He was too exhausted to fight anymore. Too exhausted to care. Cal gave himself over to the encroaching darkness and allowed himself to slip away. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 7. Chuck Gladue, thank you for subscribing on the YouTube channel. I appreciate you being here. All right, guys, that is going to do it. That seems like a good stopping spot to me. We don't know what's going to happen next. Is Cal dead? Is Ovette dead? Are they all burned alive in the magma? Who knows? But of course, if you've missed any of the story so far, it is available on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. In addition, the book is available for your purchase on Amazon. It is also available through Kindle Unlimited. So, if you're enjoying the story and cannot wait for me to continue it on Tuesday, you can always support the author by picking up his book. Hell, even if you can wait until Tuesday, you can still support the author by picking up his book. Remember, the authors do get paid for every page that you read on Kindle Unlimited if you are a Kindle Unlimited member. And they do get money when you buy their books. Support our fabulous indie authors, would you? It's great for them, good for the community, and a great way all around to support them. And of course, by liking, subscribing, and commenting on the videos on the YouTube channel, you help support me and my mission to support the indie authors and the other things that I do. Thank you all so much for being here with me this evening. I hope you have enjoyed our reading of Gyfted so far. I think we're in a great spot. It's been very exciting so far, and I believe it will continue to get more and more exciting as we go. Cal has been reunited with Ovette, but do they survive the darkness encroaching? We'll find out on our next stream, Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern. Come along and join me. Remember, when you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you should get a notification when I do go live. But I do these readings Tuesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern. If you happen to be in the United States tonight, remember, we fall back tonight. Change your clocks, unless you live in Arizona or anywhere else that doesn't actually do this nonsense. But if you live somewhere that it does the nonsense, remember that you fall back. Thank you to all of you. The greatest gift that you can give me is the gift of your time. And I appreciate that you guys gave me the gift of yours this evening, whether it was for 5 minutes or 2.5 hours. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys have yourself a wonderful evening. Once again, if you missed any of it, youtube.com/@SirArminius. Have a great night, everybody, and I hope to see you guys all again really soon. Good night, all.